Hello, and welcome back to A Gap in Justice, your podcast for anything crime-related. I am your wonderful, amazing host, Sean, here with my wonderful other host, Lindsay. How you doing?
I'm the other, more important, amazing host.
Yeah, you're okay. So, how are we doing today, Linz?
The best host of them all. I'm good. How are you, Sean?
That's good. I'm okay. It's a nice Sunday. We're having a little Sunday dinner with the family. And we're sipping a little bit of wine, relaxed. So it's gonna be a good day. I have heard nothing about this case.
Yeah, that's right.
Literally not even as I saw pictures, obviously. I get the pictures sorted. Yeah. So I saw a face of a man. Mm-hmm. So who is this guy that we're talking about today?
So I really don't feel like it would be a Gap in Justice case, or we should, be covering anything Gap in Justice if we didn't cover an Innocence Project case. So today we're going to talk about Ray Krone is his name.
Okay.
And he was part of the Innocence Project, and he served 10 years in an Arizona death row prison before he was exonerated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I think obviously given what we do when we talk about Gap in Justice, I think that I would love to talk about Innocent Project cases. I think that those are very important because obviously they've been wronged. They're being exonerated. He was actually the 100th inmate to be exonerated from death row. So,
wow.
I thought he would be an interesting guy to do. I was joking with Mom before. Mom actually gave me this idea again. She gave me the idea for last week, and we might have to start paying her.
No, I feel like it's more of she needs to stop watching so much crime things because she knows everything about anything that goes on in the world. So,
yeah. Yeah.
This is a really cool take, though. I like that we're doing a case that isn't, you know what I mean? Like, it's different. Yeah. So, I love this. So, let's get right into it.
So, the victim in this case is Kim and Krone. So, Kim was killed on the morning of December 29th, 1991. Her body was found nude in a men's restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona, at the bar where she worked. So, she was fatally stabbed, and there was very little physical evidence. The blood that was found at the scene matched Kim. And then the saliva on her body came from the most common blood type. Do you know what the most common blood type is?
No idea.
I have it. It's O positive.
Okay.
So that's why I know. So they found saliva, but it was from the most common blood type, which is O positive. And there was no semen found. And at that time, we're looking at this crime happened in 1991. So DNA evidence had just kind of started, but it really wasn't a big
Shout out to the year I was born. Just saying.
Oh, yeah. So we're looking at an old school case.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So December 29th, 1991. Investigators relied on the bite marks. So apparently there were bite marks on Kim on both her breast and her neck.
Oh, wow.
And, the investigators started talking to, local regulars at the bar and things like that. And some people had told them a regular customer named Ray Krone. So they actually said that Ray had chose to help her close the bar the previous night. So, it sounded like he was being, a nice guy, helped her close up. Maybe he was, helping her so, maybe not have to walk outside alone or things like that.
He's a regular, so wouldn't you expect?
She probably knew him fairly well.
Yeah, exactly.
But the police actually asked Krone to make a styrofoam impression of his teeth for comparison because she had these bite marks. And 2 days later, Krone was arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we could go on all day long, but I think this is part of my biggest issue, I think, with police work sometimes is that I feel like they hone in so quickly on a suspect and that they don't look anywhere else.
Yeah. Or
consider anything else. And, they take this styrofoam impression, which sounds so not legit.
Yeah.
And they take the styrofoam impression and then, 2 days later they charge him. So he's actually known as the Snaggletooth Killer.
That's messed up.
Well,
that's. I
think if you look at the next picture, so it does look like his front tooth goes a little bit longer than his other tooth.
It does.
But I'm I'm like, poor guy. That's what he's known at, is the Snaggletooth Killer.
Well, now that you know he got off, it's a lot harsher because he also is not a murderer, as we are clearly finding out. So
poor guy.
Yeah, right.
So, he was charged as of December 31st, 1991. So, like I said, 2 days later.
Mm-hmm.
He had the trial the next year in 1992. He maintained his innocence the entire time. He actually claimed, like, I was in bed at that time. I wasn't there. Like, I helped her clean up the night before. Experts for the prosecution, though, just testified that the bite marks found on the victim matched the impression that he made on the styrofoam cup. And ultimately, he was convicted of both murder and kidnapping. He was not found guilty of the sexual assault, which is random, but...
That's... What? Do you think someone else came and sexually assaulted them? Why would you not tag that on?
Well, I think the fact that there was no semen found is why they probably...
So they just can't get him for it, is what they're saying.
They probably identified and said there wasn't a sexual assault then. I feel like prosecutors will make things work. Like, they'll take it and they're like, oh, never mind, never mind to the sexual assault anymore, because ultimately they did convict him
of murder,
on his murder and kidnapping, which, how would you know he kidnapped her?
Yeah, right? She was at work.
They make laws very... They make things fit. I will just say that. Ultimately, so Arizona does have the death penalty. So he was sentenced to death and then a consecutive 21-year term of imprisonment, which I think is another funny thing about the criminal justice system. So ultimately they found him guilty on the murder, and the murder comes then with the death penalty. Yeah. But then they have to sentence him then for the kidnapping too, so they give him a 21-year sentence for the kidnapping.
Yeah, so after you die, you have to serve 21 years. Sick. Absolutely. Okay, that makes literally no sense. But okay, that's fine. This is how I feel about the criminal justice system.
Yeah. So if you realize though, like the prosecution's entire case was hinging on this bite mark analysis.
Yeah, how different are people's bite marks? Like, I understand them being, like, insanely, like, but you said he bit it, like, on a styrofoam. It's not like, we're not talking about, like, this mold of his teeth. Yeah, like, he literally, like, it's not like he molded his teeth and they're like, man, this is such a fit. Like, they literally just did... it's crazy.
Well, as you can see in this picture, like, obviously they were doing some pretty legit...
teeth analysis, huh?
This is the thing. I always try to, like, put myself in other people's shoes. So if you think about it, like, if you're sitting on the jury and now you see these, like, jumbo pictures of his teeth, and now you have this expert coming and saying that, these are his teeth and this matches it, wouldn't you believe it?
Yeah, why not?
Absolutely.
He's an expert, right? Like, that's...
Wink. So, before we talk a little bit about the reliability of bite mark analysis, he did win a new trial on appeal in 1996. So he spent about 4 years in prison, and then he did win a appeal, but he was actually convicted of it again. And it all went back to this expert bite mark testimony. This time he was the judge actually just sentenced him to life in prison, not the death penalty, because he actually had doubts that he was the real killer.
Oh, so the judge literally was like, I don't think so. Like,
the judge was like,
Yeah, that's warning number one. Right. If your whole stick is that you're literally betting on just the teeth, and the judge is like, I don't really think so. Like, that's rough. So
yeah. So in 2002, after he had served more than 10 years in prison, DNA testing proved his innocence. So they actually DNA testing concluded that the saliva and the blood found on the victim excluded him as a source. Wow. And it actually matched somebody else.
So they found the other person?
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about so they find it 10 years later. Is that because the advances in... So he literally had to wait 10 years until the technology caught up to him to get out of prison. Yes. That's just crazy just to think about the technological standpoint. Like, literally, like, 10 years later, they literally like, nope, we know now that we were wrong. Sorry. So the first thing I think about is he's gonna get a payout, right? Like how much?
We'll talk about
how much is 10 years worth of your time though? You can't get that back, man.
You will find out, and you cannot get that back.
No, like
I think we'll talk about his payout because he definitely did. So, at the time that Ray was arrested, he had 0 criminal record. He had been honorably discharged from the military, and he actually had worked for the Postal Service for 7 years. So he's not a typical suspect, which leads me even more to, like, get a little bit on the police about, like, basically somebody said, we seen Ray with her last night, and the police were like, yep,
and that's crazy because I think about him being, like, a regular, and, like, yeah, he helped her clean up the night before, like, that doesn't place him there.
He's a
like
nice guy, and he legitly got crapped on for being a nice guy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that sounds crazy to think that, like, if you're the nice guy who helps someone the next day, if someone gets murdered, you're the guy who's suspected. Mm-hmm. Like, you gotta think about that. Like, you're like, you did a kind favor to someone that he probably knew.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he got, just struck down for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. That's insane.
So, ultimately, DNA cleared his name. And he was actually released on Nope, I lied. I'm so dyslexic. He was released on April 8th, 2002. And on the 24th of that month, the district attorney office filed to formally dismiss all charges against him. The murder and sexual assault charges have then since been brought up on the other suspects. So, a guy by the name of Kenneth Phillips was actually the person who tested positive for the DNA found on Kim. And they had since brought up, like I said, the charges against him. Mm-hmm. So, the funny thing is, Phillips lived a short distance from the bar where Kim had worked, although it was proven that he was never considered a suspect in her murder. So this just goes to show even more how much they did not do any type of investigation related to this.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In 2006, this Kenneth Phillips was actually convicted and sentenced to 53 years. So there is somebody, Kim is not,
Yeah, someone's serving for it.
Yeah, somebody's serving time for Kim's death. Yep. They ultimately found the true killer of...
It's a long time to get away with it, though.
It was. He was actually already incarcerated on an unrelated sex crime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, when I was looking up cases for this week, I basically was, like, Googling, like, unjust cases or, I don't know, something like that. And, it showed, like, or especially related to, like, Innocence Project, it showed a lot of people... If they were cleared, it showed, like, the original person who did it, and almost every single one of them were already incarcerated on a different crime. Yeah. And so
they've been incarcerated anyways. So
ultimately, I feel like they're not out there to hurt more people. Yeah. But now Ray has lost 10 years of his life.
Crazy. Because
the police didn't do their job.
I can't even imagine being innocent and going through this. Mm-hmm. Like, you literally...
He maintained his innocence the entire time.
Yeah, you're innocent. Like, you literally, like, just think about, like, if someone ever, like, says, like, that's not true, how defensive you get immediately. You know what I mean? It's just a normal life. Like.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the bite mark analysis, because this is ultimately what convicted him. Like I said, there was no other evidence that tied him to it.
That's literally it, yeah.
So, he is actually the most common case when you think of bite mark evidence, bite mark analysis. So people will say Ray Krone. This is actually when I was talking to Mom, she goes, what about that guy who got exonerated for not biting somebody? Or I don't, you know how Mom is. She just says random things.
Yeah, she's also the woman who tried to call Blockbuster and tell us that there was a Jumanji 2. So let's tell them that how old were we? This was before 2000?
Probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But hilarious. Let's be honest, there is a Jumanji 2 coming out in December, and she goes, I knew one was coming.
Yeah, so that's the the type of person we're dealing with, so.
Yeah. So, bite mark evidence has been introduced in trials all over the country and sometimes has ultimately been the smoking gun that leads to a conviction. It's ultimately the only thing that tied Ray, or allegedly tied Ray to the crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a process in which dentists attempt to match the marks found at crime scenes with the dental impressions of suspects. So, if a victim is bitten by a perpetrator during a crime and the police have a suspect, dentists can attempt to, quote, match the bite marks to the suspect's teeth.
I can do that. you give me an impression and give me a bite mark. I mean, I can put them up to each other and tell them if it looks like alike or not. Like,
yeah, that looks good.
That's close. I mean, that's.
So, bite mark evidence has actually been introduced as being close to DNA in terms of accuracy. However, there is no scientific validation for the notion that somebody's teeth are unique to him or her in the way that fingerprints or DNA is unique to each individual. So, I mean, I couldn't even find a percentage of the reliability because it's probably so low.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you think this is actually used? Like,
ultimately, we do have to keep in mind. So this crime happened in the 90s, and I feel like there was a lot of unjust things happening.
Yeah, I mean, the technology wasn't as good as today. You
Now,
can't get away with stuff nowadays unless
nowadays it's going to be DNA or probably nothing. I think they would use bite mark analysis now if they already had DNA, like just to further corroborate it. But I doubt there's any recent just bite mark analysis. Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
So part of what I found interesting is that, so it kind of broke down a little bit, like, why there's just no scientific support or research about the accuracy or the reliability of bite mark. That bite marks can often be found at the crime scene of, like, violent crimes. I mean, that's pretty violent to, like, bite somebody during your
That's crazy,
assault.
yeah. Like, multiple bite marks and stuff?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, you can find them at murders, assaults, sexual assaults, things like that. But it can be extremely difficult to accurately investigate. So part of it is, if you're a part of, like, a sexual assault and you're biting, like, the victim could ultimately have, like, multiple injuries. And it could probably be hard to, like, figure out what goes with what.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The other part, too, is unlike a dental impression at a doctor's office, bite marks can be found on materials like skin, clothing, or soft tissue. Human skin is elastic, so it swells, it heals, and it deforms or warps the bite.
That's literally...
So it does not align properly.
That was literally my first thought. I was like, first of all,
nerd.
I mean, no, because you're literally not biting the same material. Like, it's gonna, especially skin is so resistant, and I mean, it's not gonna make the same, especially if you're doing some crazy stuff. You're biting someone while a sexual assault is happening. Like, you think that's gonna be a perfect bite mark? Like, if you were forced to bite a cup, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
that's insane. Like,
so they're just saying ultimately, like, and again, I love this article. Experts are in quotes. So it says, experts often use pictures to compare a person's teeth to bite marks on the victim. So they're using pictures, which ultimately make it even worse.
They're saying experts are dentists. Yeah, they're dentists, but they're not forensic analysis teeth experts. Like, they're not literally like, that's...
Again, I feel like that's where they get juries, because they're like, look at it, it's a dentist, and dentists work with teeth, and and we found teeth bite marks on this person.
There's teeth, and he lined them up.
And he's a dentist.
He's a dentist, so he definitely
and he
knows.
At the pictures.
You know how many?
And it fits.
You know how many mouths he's looked at over his life?
Thousands.
This is one of them, and he knows it. He's an expert.
It's just so unreliable. I'm like, could you imagine Ray being like, oh my God, really?
He's like, dude, those aren't even my teeth. I wonder if he's like that. He's like, are you serious right now? Like, those don't even look like my teeth. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I tried to search for some type of percentage, and there was ultimately not a percentage of how reliable bite mark testimony or bite mark analysis is, and that probably means it's so low.
Yeah, they're embarrassed to show it. Like
I said, Ray Krone's case is actually the most popular
Yeah.
bite mark analysis case. There was actually another one that I found, a guy out of California by the name of Bill Richards. So at his trial in 1997, and again, we're in the 1990s,
yeah.
so I feel like the people got creative.
Yeah.
A forensic analyzed Bill's teeth and a bite mark found on his wife's body. The expert testified that only 1 to 2% of the population could have left the bite mark, and he could not exclude Bill as having given the bite mark, which is funny. So it's only 1 to 2%, but he couldn't exclude him either. But that ultimately led to his conviction. He spent about 10 years, the same time. The same expert then recanted his original testimony, and Bill was exonerated.
And this is for his wife?
Yes.
This is brutal.
But this is the thing. So, in Ray Krone's case, they only exonerated him because the DNA evidence led to somebody else.
Yeah.
In this Bill Richards case, the district attorney appealed, but the California Court of Appeals reversed his exoneration. The Supreme Court then upheld the reversal on the grounds that at the time, experts could not recant their original testimony. In 2015, the California Innocence Project actually pushed for a new law allowing experts to recant their testimony. And after the law was passed in 2016, the California Supreme Court found that the bad bite mark science presented was central to his case, and they ultimately reversed it. So
it's like 20 years, dude.
Yeah, I mean, 2007, this expert recanted his original testimony. It wasn't until 2016 that they ultimately reversed it.
9 years later. He's like, I was wrong. And then they're like, 9 years later, we'll release you then.
You can't say that.
Yeah, we already said you were right, so you can't be wrong.
And that is ultimately, I think, something that makes me really... And I try to tell people all the time, once you're in the criminal justice system, it's so hard to get out of it. And, it's you can clearly see that the situation is just not right. The Bill Richards things, it's just not right.
Yeah.
But a whole law had to be passed.
To get him out, yeah.
For him to even reverse the decision.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Ridiculous. So we have a lot of other pictures of just Ray Krone after he was exonerated. Like I said, he was the 100th inmate exonerated from death row, which I thought was interesting. He spent some time on death row. Remember, his sentence was converted to life.
Yeah,
because
life.
The judge really doubted if he did it or not.
Yeah.
When you Google Kenneth Phillips, who is the actual killer of Kim, I get sad because Ray Krone comes up.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like Kim isn't even really getting the justice she deserves because the guy who didn't do it and was wrongly accused of it continues to be in the limelight, essentially.
And like I said, this could have been her friend. A person that came and helped her clean up and stuff is taking the fall for something he didn't do why she got murdered.
Right.
That's messed up. That couldn't even possibly be more messed up.
So, as always, I like to kind of look up research. I like to look back. So, if Ray is the 100th inmate who was exonerated, I wanted to look and see who was the first. Mm-hmm. So, who was the first exonerated by DNA? So, the first exonerated was a guy by the name of Kirk Bloodworth. He was convicted in 1985.
Super sick name, honestly.
Bloodworth. He was convicted of sexual assault, rape, and murder of a 9-year-old in the state of Maryland.
Jesus.
Guess what he was convicted on? What piece of evidence?
Oh, God.
Come on.
Is it teeth, dude?
We're in 1985.
I don't know.
What, besides bite mark analysis, what do you think is one of the worst ways? What do you think is probably a majority of the Innocence Project cases about?
Probably fingerprints or something.
Fingerprints. Fingerprints are a pretty good way to convict somebody.
No, I'm in 1985, bro.
Eyewitness testimony.
Oh, dude, that wasn't even on my radar because I don't even think that's a thing.
It was definitely a thing. Next week we're going to talk about an Innocence Project eyewitness person just because.
God. Makes me want to throw
many
up.
people, Innocence Projects will actually, like, they'll take cases and they'll screen them. And if they see, like, eyewitness testimony is ultimately what convict them, they almost automatically take the case because...
Yeah, like, that's literally the difference of, like, someone telling on you and just, like, making fabrications about you. Like, you know how often that just happens in real life? Like, but this is going to sentence you now? That's literally crazy.
I have no idea what I did last week. And sometimes police will go back to, quote, eyewitnesses 2 weeks later, a month later, and ask them what they've seen. And I think I hope people in general, like, want to be helpful. But the problem with people wanting to be helpful and important is that you probably don't remember.
I feel like cops also lead sometimes. You know what I mean?
Oh, God, yeah.
You're like, oh, well, you said that we saw blank in the alleyway. You know what I mean? And then you're like, yeah, I totally said that. Like, because...
It's funny that you said that. So I was actually researching I was looking up cases for next week. So, and I was looking at, I wanted to do, like, a juvenile case and, like, related to police interrogation. And I found one that I think I'm going to talk about. And it's like, they say it's the worst fact-feeding police interrogation they've ever seen. Like, if you're feeding the person the facts... Are they really giving it to you?
He's like, so he was murdered with this weapon. He's like, what weapon did he get murdered with? He's like, I saw him with a 9mm. He's like, he said it. It's the right gun. See, he knew exactly what gun it was.
Yeah.
That's literally insane. Like,
so yeah, this Kurt, this first guy who was exonerated by DNA, it was 5 eyewitness testimony. And actually, in 1992, he had read about DNA testing. And he was able to get some items tested. Originally, they thought the evidence was destroyed. And they found the evidence in the judge's chamber. Random.
Yeah, that's really weird.
And you know the crazy thing about this, too? And again, another problem with our criminal justice system. So, they ended up releasing Kirk in 1993, so about a year later. So they released him ultimately because the DNA evidence did not match. However, they would not exonerate him until 10 years later when they identified the real killer by evidence.
So they literally just said that he did it even though they let him out?
No, they literally were like, okay, DNA said you didn't do it, but we're not really going to exonerate you until we find the real killer.
So he still had it on his record and stuff, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're not exonerated, then yeah, it's on your record.
That's so... Okay, so he's living a life like he's a murderer, even though he didn't murder anyone, and they knew he didn't murder anyone.
And essentially, the state of Maryland said, well, until we find the real killer, until we can identify the real killer by evidence,
you're gonna be him.
That's a joke, right?
That sounds literally crazy. Like, we know you didn't do it, but we're not gonna say that you didn't do it.
I think people know, like, the system is broken. But the problem, though, too, is that, sure, we can talk about cases from the 1980s and we can talk about cases from the 1990s, but also this stuff is happening today. I just said it wasn't until 2003 that this guy was exonerated. That was not that long ago.
You said that the one guy... for his wife didn't get out until 2016.
Yeah.
Until a bill was passed, or like a law was passed. Man, like, that's crazy. Like, it literally took an extra almost 10 years after a guy says that.
To the point where new laws have to be passed for things to change.
It sounds insane.
You know what the craziest thing, too, about Kirk? So there's just a lot of different stuff where, you know, you see Ray now, you know, this is him maintaining his innocence, like him at a life after death row.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Kirk, so they actually, a guy named Kimberly actually was the one who was eventually identified by evidence, and Kirk said that him and Kimberly actually used to work out together. They were in the same prison. Oh. So Kimberly was in prison for a different murder, or a different crime. And essentially him and I'm like, what a surreal moment. Could you imagine getting out of prison and realizing, like, it's this other guy, and this guy used to spot you for workouts?
That's crazy.
You SOB.
Yeah, it's like, dude, like, you literally couldn't, like, you're already in here for murder, like, you can't hook it up, like, I'm like, yo, I did this, like.
Well, you know what's funny, though, about that is I've read cases, people have actually came forward and said, hey, I did this crime. That guy did not do the crime. You think they let people out of prison?
Probably not, the way you're looking at me.
The way you're looking at me.
Looking at me like...
No!
Dude,
they make people jump through hoops.
That's crazy.
So ridiculous.
Well, to be fair,
about
that point is... Someone could just lie about that, though. Like, someone could be like... If they're already on for murder and they're like, yo, my homie... I'd rather have my homie out, like, whatever.
Sure. I guess somebody could turn around and be like... Oh, I did that. I mean, if you're already going to be in prison, I'm sure some people are...
Yeah, I'd like, whatever. Yeah, I have life. Yeah, I have life in here. I got you. You have a few years, whatever. Like,
yeah, but sure. So, yeah, part of me does understand that piece of it. I do get that. So, back to how much is 10 years of your life worth?
Dude, I better be making the buco bucks 10 years, man.
Dude, I'd rather be poor and not spend 10 years in prison. How about that?
Dude, we're telling me 10 years of my life, and then we can go through some crazy stuff. Like, I don't know, man. We're talking about billions, man. I want to be able.
He did not get billions.
I want to be able to buy myself and own islands. Like, that's how much money I want if I'm in for 10 years, man.
So he ultimately filed a civil suit, and it was settled for $4.4 million.
That's like 4% of what I wanted, so that's
no go.
That's not even. That's like 0.4% of what I wanted. That's rough, man.
So Arizona is still a capital punishment state. So I just wanted to look that up to see. Some ultimately are and some are not. So, the United States abolished the death penalty, and then it was reinstated in 1976. Okay. So I just kind of looked up a little bit about did you hear about, I assume you heard about the Supreme Court decision back in 2002 about ultimately certain execution forms are
banned or whatever. Not yet. Yeah.
That they are
you can't be electrocuted to death.
Yes.
But it's either lethal injection or
Yes, in certain forms.
Yeah.
Or there's a certain word I want to use though.
Well, you're not smart enough to use it, obviously.
Hold on. You're lucky I can't cuss on this podcast right now. So, basically it was saying it was barbaric,
Yeah.
I
mean, if you're getting electrocuted to death,
you can't use electrocution anymore.
Yeah. Wasn't there firing squads and stuff before too? I don't think you can do that anymore, right?
I think you can in one state. I feel like I looked this up. There's one state on the West Coast. Oh, I swear it's Nevada or something. You can do a firing squad.
That's crazy.
I mean, you can request it, but them doing it is pretty rare.
I'm thinking about back in the day where you get stoned to death.
Nope, you cannot get stoned to death anymore.
That's a way to go, man. That's a way to go.
Now I'm curious. Hold on, I need to look up firing squad because I know that there's one on here.
That's my first one that sounds insane to me. A bunch of people
there's
just
one in 2010.
A firing squad?
Yeah.
Yikes, dude.
In Utah. I knew
Utah.
it was
Utah.
Yes.
Yeah, that Utah always. Utah.
It was this Ronnie Lee Gardner. He actually requested it. So he was executed by firing squad on June 8th. So 9 years ago, looking at 9 years.
I mean, he's like, I'm going to go out, might as well just...
There's such random things on here. When you Google stuff, has anyone survived a firing squad? How does death by firing squad work? Well, let's see. You're killed by being fired at.
Yeah, people have guns and they shoot them at you. If you survive, then that's pretty rough and they didn't do their job.
Yeah.
So.
You know what I did find out about firing squad, though? I just Google random stuff. So, the firing squad will consist of numerous different people. A majority of the guns have blanks. Did you know that?
No.
So... the reason that they do that is so you don't know what gun has the actual bullet. And so it takes away, the guilt factor of the people shooting the guns.
So, because they don't know who did it, I guess?
Yeah, they don't know.
Wait, so there's only one bullet for a firing range?
Yeah, but I mean, if you have 10 people who are doing it and you all are aiming at his heart, and everybody shoots at the same time, and you know what I mean. These are like trained people who are trained to shoot. So.
I was like, dude, like you're telling me there's one bullet out of these 10 people, and you're trying to make me kill him?
They are.
That's a lot of pressure, man. Like that's insane.
You know, firing squad was ultimately usually reserved for like military.
Yeah.
But yeah, so okay, now that we got off on that tangent.
Yeah, that was crazy. That's a lot of info, and that's insane. I hope you guys liked that, because that was a rabbit hole for sure.
That's the way my mind works.
Yeah, for sure.
So I actually
There we go. What is this picture?
So actually he got that tattooed, so that's a tattoo, Freebird. So that's when he was
that's awesome.
Freed. So April 8th.
So if you guys are listening on like Apple like iTunes
or
something,
Stitcher, something like
yeah,
that.
this is he has a super cool tattoo that says "Free Bird" and it's an awesome bird. So obviously symbolizing him getting out. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably tattoo some stuff too.
Yeah, that's crazy, dude.
So I actually just wanted to look, like I said, Arizona is still a capital punishment state. So I wanted to look and see like the last time somebody was executed, because you know there is that 2002 thing. So Joseph Wood III was actually executed in 2014. And he was executed by lethal injection.
Yeah,
so,
that's how I think most of them are now, right?
But like so for example, the state of California, they have death row, and they won't actually execute anybody because they can't find a combination of drugs that are appropriate, essentially.
What? That sounds crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because when you think about it, like, people who believe in capital punishment are just like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of capital punishment that's like, well, people shouldn't suffer.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're... I don't know. I am definitely one of those people who I wouldn't want someone to suffer. They're murderers, I know that... But it's one of those things where you're already killing them. Like, they don't need, like, just let them go out, like, whatever, like...
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time, I think about cases where there's murderers and they kill themselves because...
Yeah.
I mean, they're already gonna die anyways. They kill themselves. You think about... obviously Aaron Hernandez, you think about him how that's... See, of course, it's sports related. That's how I know about things like that. But you think about... I mean, you think about that murder case, and then he hung himself and set the place on fire and stuff. Like, it's insane. Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot of controversy, though, around the drugs. And I was just looking on here to see what drugs were actually used. So it looks like they used a benzodiazepine. So a benzodiazepine is normally, like, the most common one is, like, Klonopin. So a benzodiazepine is, they typically will use that for, like, sleeping or anxiety type stuff. Benzodiazepines are not very popular. Like, you don't really prescribe those type of things nowadays.
Yeah.
The other thing he had was an opiate. So it was hydromorphone. So these are not popular drugs, you know what I mean? And they're trying to find these combinations to do on lethal injection. And it says this combo had only been used on one other execution, actually out of Ohio. So this Joseph Woods, it was considered a botched execution. So what should have taken 10 minutes lasted an hour and 57 minutes. So he gasped, he snorted that entire time after the drugs were injected. The entire procedure took almost 2 hours. And again, I think this goes back to like when people, so ultimately he got a sedative and then a narcotic. It's supposed to be lethal.
It just pretty much sounds like they're giving you an overdose.
Essentially, they are. Yeah.
That's crazy. Like,
so
I thought it'd be like poison or something. You know what I mean?
They're basically saying this combination should have been lethal 15 times, or like 15%, whatever, lethal, and it should have been sufficient enough to kill him, and it didn't. So it said a media witness compared Woods' breathing to a fish gulping for air.
Yeah.
And yeah, it took almost 2 hours, so they actually considered it like botched. So,
yeah, I was gonna say you're probably like gasping for air, like you're drowning.
I noticed too that Arizona took a break. So they had an execution in November of 2000. And then they didn't have another one until May of 2007. So I think they took a lot of time. That Supreme Court decision came out in 2002.
Yeah.
And then they probably took quite a bit of time. So, I mean, it's a lot of red tape. It's a lot of legal work. And, I mean, like, look at that with the criminal justice system. Like, we have a death row. And not that I'm going to talk about capital punishment, but, like, we have a death row. And now states can't even execute the people on their death row because of their own issues that they have to jump through as well. And part of me is like, do we ever think about the victims or the victim's family here?
Yeah, like they're
We're
literally
worried about how we execute people.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, this has been a very eye-opening case for me where just in general, like talking about all of the I mean, there's obviously injustices, but having to wait this long to find your injustice and then them saying, "Here's the amount of money that we think we owe you for the time."
Yeah.
It's kind of disgusting. Like
it's disgusting.
Yeah, it's very, and like I said, this wasn't even 0.4% of what I would ask for 10 years of my life. So it's not even like
that.
Yeah, so it's not even close. Like, and I mean, well, it's really good that he's out now. And
yeah, so since Ray founded Witness to Innocence in 2003, he continues to be an active member. He speaks across the nation and urges states to essentially abolish the death penalty.
That's awesome that he's already essentially wasted 10 years of his life.
You get out and you do good.
Yeah, and he wants to help other people not have this happen to them. Mm-hmm. So that's just, I mean, a good human being. Thank God for, 10 years obviously isn't as long as some other people. It's still an insane amount of time, but now he can live his life, so...
Which state do you think has the most executions? Which state
I would say Texas.
Death penalty the most. Boom. Texas.
Yeah, dude, like, it's not even, like, at first, when you think of death penalty, you think of Texas immediately. Like,
Texas does not play.
Texas people carry guns and probably shoot people on the streets for executions, so, like...
Yeah. You know what I just looked to, now that I'm looking at, of course I'm Googling stuff as we're speaking, so Arizona is actually one of the 4 states that have clauses in their state laws that actually still allows inmates to be killed in gas chambers.
Oh my God, what is this? Nazi Germany?
So
like, what is happening, dude?
Well, when you Google, like, all this stuff acts like, can you still do this? Can you still do this? Can you still do this? And, I think that's the thing of, like, we live in the United States, but then each individual state has their own state laws that ultimately decide what they can or cannot do. But then you have the Supreme Court that says, you have to look at the way that you use capital punishment, and it's like, no wonder everything is so confusing.
Yeah, every state being different in general is very strange to me. Mm-hmm. Being as though we're a nation built on a set of laws, but we have differing laws for a million different things. Mm-hmm. Think about the marijuana thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
this is like bringing up all the controversy.
Dude, cause it's just like insane. Like everything, like it's state by state. Like people are so high strung about everything, and it's like it's insane to me. So
how many states do you think still have the death penalty? More than less? Do you think it's more or less?
Probably less.
Oh, you're so wrong. 30 states still have the death penalty. It's still
Don't say I'm so wrong. There's 50. There's 50 states. I wasn't even that off.
Yeah, you were.
30 and 20. That's not even bad. So.
No, that 30 states still have the death penalty. It's
yeah,
still legal.
that's crazy. So Wisconsin isn't one of them, obviously.
No,
so.
Wisconsin. Do you know the history of Wisconsin's death penalty?
No, but I feel like we need to wrap it up because we could go.
No, we're talking about this one anyways. So I know this I remember doing in college. I did this whole thing on Wisconsin and death penalty and capital punishment. So Wisconsin did have the death penalty. It was abolished in 1853. And it was one of the earliest states to abolish the death penalty. They executed one person. So we executed one person.
They're like, nope, this is wrong.
And he actually was convicted of killing his wife.
He was found not guilty?
And
is that what happened? Oh, God, it is.
Well, we don't know.
Oh, okay.
And he was executed in the city of Kenosha.
Yes, dude.
So on July 23rd, 1950, he was hanged. And...
Hung.
hanged.
Hanged? That's how you say it?
Okay, death by hanging.
Hanging.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I was like, that sounds crazy.
So he was actually hanged. It says hanged. He was hanged from a tree. Like 3,000 people came out to the Kenosha courthouse.
Like hung out, like, hey, let's watch it.
Shut up.
This is some witchcraft
Yes,
stuff, bro. This is some Salem stuff, man. It's
3,000
crazy.
people came out to watch him get hung from a tree.
Sick.
And a big reason as to why Wisconsin abolished it is because he struggled and remained alive for about 20 minutes before he finally strangled.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Dude, it just reminds me
about
of
3 years after that, Wisconsin got rid of the death penalty.
It just reminds me of like the Roman days where people would like come out and go to the Colosseum and watch people get mauled by lions, and they're like, "Oh, this is crazy!" Like it's
insanity.
I mean, Wisconsin's always ahead of its time, honestly. Like Wisconsin is we get bad rap sometimes. You know, they always think we're country and. They always think we're
we
dumb.
Are the cheese state. I say that's true, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, they always think we're moron drinkers, but I mean, though we
probably also true.
Yeah, even though we drink, I mean, we're not all dumb, so you know.
Just like cheese. Yeah, as we start the podcast saying we're drinking wine.
First of all, if we're from really Wisconsin people, we'd be drinking Miller Lite. So let's be real.
Some cheese, though, I would eat that. All right, let's 100%. Wrap it up, Sean. You
talk
too much.
So first of all, lady, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We had a lot of fun talking today. I hope you guys just were relaxing and taking it all in and getting some information that you didn't know. So, do you have anything else to say, Lindsay? Even though you talked this entire time.
No.
Okay, cool. So finally she chooses to be quiet, and we'll wrap it up there. We love you guys. We will see you hopefully next week. We'll have one out for you, and peace out.